Hi, I'm Pranamya, and you're watching Pages of the Globe. So, if you're new to my channel, I'm Pranamya, and I read short stories on this channel, and I give you an analysis about them. I tell you a little bit about the author, I tell you about the historical context of the story, and how you can apply it to the real world today. If you want to know more about my channel, please check out the intro video that I have posted. It should be pinned on my page. But without further ado, let's get on with the introduction. So the poem that I'm going to be reading today is Tamerlane by Edgar Allan Poe. Now, Edgar Allan Poe was born on January 19th, 1809 in Boston, Massachusetts. As for his writing career, he is best known for his poetry and short stories, particularly his tales of mystery and macabre. He's considered a central figure in Romanticism in the United States and just American literature as a whole. Now, some of the most major or most famous works include the poems The Raven and short stories such as The Telltale Heart, The Fall of the House of Usher, The Mask of the Red Death, The Black Cat, and The Cask of Amontillado, several of which I've actually read on my channel. I've read many of his short stories and poems. I actually have an entire playlist called Poe's Poems. If you ever want to go check that out, go ahead. I do a very thorough analysis of each and every one of his poems. As for his innovations, Poe is credited with pioneering the detective fiction genre with his story, The Murderer in the Row Morgue. He's also contributed to the emerging genre of science fiction. Now, as for his literary criticism, in addition to his fiction and poetry, Poe was actually a literary critic and editor. His critical works include The Philosophy of Composition, which explains his writing process for The Raven. Now, as for his personal life and struggles, Poe actually married his 13-year-old cousin, Virginia Clem, in 1836. Their relationship was marked by tragedy, as Virginia suffered from tuberculosis and died in 1847. After that, Poe struggled with depression, alcoholism, and financial instability throughout his life. However, he was obviously met with great success later. Now, as for his death, Edgar Allan Poe died on October 7th, 1849, under mysterious circumstances. He was found delirious on the streets of Baltimore and spent his last days in a hospital. The exact cause of his death remains unknown, with theories ranging from alcoholism to rabies or other illnesses. Now, as for his legacy, what he's actually known for today, Poe's work has had a lasting impact on literature and popular culture. You'll see, I remember when we were actually learning about The Raven in my 8th grade LA class, there were so many different adaptations of it. There's an entire The Simpsons episode where I think it's Homer Simpson, who he just reads aloud the entire The Raven poem, and it's very, very long. And it's funny, but at the same time, The Raven is such a scary and almost creepy poem that, it takes away the silliness of The Simpsons. But anyway, as for his legacy, he is celebrated for his inventive and chilling stories, as well as his mastery of the Gothic genre. There's actually an award called the Edgar Awards named after him, which are presented annually by the Mystery Writers of America to honor his outstanding contributions to the mystery genre. So the poem that I'm actually going to be reading today is Tamerlane by Edgar Allan Poe. Now, with Tamerlane, this is a very, it's a very long poem, but it's one of my favorites because it has such an interesting story to it. It's basically about a man named Tamerlane who is about to die, so he's confessing his sins to a Roman Catholic priest. Now, he's basically just talking about his life and about how he had many conquests, but about how he almost misses a certain someone and how he treated that certain someone, and then how he almost gave them away and traded them in for this amazing power and wealth that he has now. Now, I don't want to spoil too much, so without further ado, let's get on with the poem. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment down below which short story you would like me to read next. Tamerlane by Edgar Allan Poe. Kind solace in a dying hour, such father is not now my theme. I will not madly deem that power of earth may shrive me of the sin. unearthly pride hath revelled in. I have no time to dote or dream. You call it hope, that fire of fire. It is but agony of desire. If I can hope, O God, I can. Its fount is holier, more divine. I would not call it the fool, old man, but such is not a gift of thine. Know thou the secret of spirit, bowed from its wild pride into shame. O yearning heart, I did inherit thy withering portion with the fame. The searing glory which hath shone amid the jewels of my throne, halo of hell, and with a pain, not hell shall make me fear again. O craving heart for the lost flowers, and sunshine of my summer hours, the undying voice of that dead time with its interminable chime, rings in the spirit of a spell, upon thy emptiness a knell. I have not always been as now, the fever diadem on my brow. I claimed in one usurpingly, hath not the same fierce heirdom given. Rome to the Caesar, this to me, the heritage of a kindly mind and a proud spirit which hath striven triumphantly with humankind. On mountain soil I first drew life, the mists of the Taglay have shed nightly their dews upon my head, and I believe the winged strife and tumult of the headlong air have nestled in my very hair. So late from heaven that dew, it fell, mid dreams of an unholy night, upon me with a touch of hell, while the red flashing of light from clouds that hung like banners o'er appeared to my half-closing eye the pageantry of monarchy, and the deep trumpet thunder's roar came hurriedly upon me, telling of human battle, where my voice, my own voice, silly child, was swelling. Oh, how my spirit would rejoice and leap within me at the cry, the battle cry of victory. The rain came down upon my head unsheltered, and the heavy wind was giant-like, so thou my mind. It was but man, I thought, who shed laurels upon me, and the rush, the torrent of the chilly air, gurgled within my ear, the crush of empires with a captive's prayer, the hum of suitors, and the tone of flattery round a sovereign's throne. My passions from that hapless hour usurped a tyranny which men have deemed, since I'd reached to power. My innate nature be it so, but, Father, there lived one who then in my boyhood, when their fire burnt with the still intenser glow, for passion must with youth expire, even then, who knew this iron heart in woman's weakness had a part. I have no words, alas, to tell the loveliness of loving well, nor would I now attempt to trace the more than beauty of a face, whose lineaments upon my mind are shadows of the unstable wind. Thus I remember having dwelt some page of early lore upon, with a loitering eye, till I have felt the letters with their meaning melt to fantasies with none. Oh, she was worthy of all love, love as in an infancy was mine. 'Twas such an angel, eyes above, might envy her young heart the shrine on which my every hope and thought were incense, then a goodly gift, for they were childish and upright, pure as her young example taught. Why did I leave it and adrift, trust to the fire within for light? We grew in age and love together, roaming the forest and the wild, my breast her shield in the wintry weather, and when the friendly sunshine smiled, and she would mark the opening skies, I saw no heaven but in her eyes. Young love's first lesson is the heart, for mid that sunshine and those smiles, when from our little cares apart and laughing at her girlish wiles, I throw me on her throbbing breast, and pour my spirit out in tears. There was no need to speak the rest, no need to quiet any fears, of her who'd asked no reason why, but turned on me her quiet eye. Yet more than worthy of love, my spirit struggled with and strove, when on the mountain peak alone ambition lent it a new tone. I had no being but in thee, the world and all it did contain, in the earth, the air, the sea. Its joy, its little lot of pain, that was new pleasure, the ideal. Dim vanities of dreams by night, and dinner nothings which were real. Shadows and a more shadowy light parted upon their misty wings, and so confusedly became thine image and a name, two separate yet most intimate things. I was ambitious, have you known, the passion, father, you have not. A cottager, I'd marked a throne of half the world as my own, and murmur at such lowly lot, but just like any other dream upon the vapor of the dew, my own had passed, did not the beam of beauty which did while it throw. The minute, the hour, the day oppress my mind with double loveliness. We walked together on the crown of a high mountain which looked down, afar from its proud natural towers of rock and forest, on the hills, the dwindled hills, begirt with bowers, and shouting with 1,000 rills. I spoke to her of power and pride, but mystically in such a guise that she might deem it not beside the moment's converse in her eyes. I read, perhaps too carelessly, a mingled feeling of my own. The flush on her bright cheek to me seemed to become a queenly throne. Too well I should let it be, light in the wilderness alone. I wrapped myself in grandeur then, and donned a visionary crown. Yet it was not that fantasy had thrown her mantle over me, but that among the rabble, men, lion ambition is chained down, and crouches to a keeper's hand. Not so in deserts, where the grand, the wild, the terrible conspire, with their own breath to fan his fire. Look round thee now, on Samarcand. Is she not the queen of earth, her pride, above all cities in her hand? Their destinies, in all beside, of glory, which the world hath known, stands she not nobly and alone. Falling, her veriest stepping a stone, shall form the pedestal of a throne, and whose her sovereign, Timur, he, whom the astonished people saw, striding over empires haughtily, a diadem outlaw. O human love, thou spirit given, on earth of all we hope in heaven, which fall'st into the soul like rain upon the siroc withered plain, and failing in thy power to bless, but leav'st the heart a wilderness. Idea which bindest life around with music of so strange a sound, and farewell of so wild a birth, farewell, for I have won the earth. When hope, the eagle that toward, could see no cliff beyond him in the sky, his pinions were bent droopingly, and homeward turned his softened eye. 'Twas sunset, when the sun will part. There comes a sullenness of heart to him who would still look upon the glory of the summer sun. That soul will hate the evening mist, so often lovely, and will list to the sound of the coming darkness, known to those whose spirits hearken, as one who in a dream of night could fly, but cannot from a danger nigh. What though the moon, the white moon, shed all the splendor of her noon, her smile is chilly, and her beam in that time of dreariness will seem so like you gather in your breath a portrait taken after death. And boyhood is a summer sun, whose waning is the dreariest one. For all we live to know is known, and all we seek to keep hath flown. Let life then as the day flower fall, with the noonday beauty which is all. I reached my home no more, for all had flown who made it so. I passed from out its mossy door, and though my tread was soft and low, a voice came from the threshold stone, of one whom I had earlier known. Oh, I defy thee, hell, to show, on beds of fire that burned below, a humbler heart, a deeper woe. Father, I firmly do believe, I know for death, who comes for me, from regions of the blest afar, where there is nothing to deceive, hath left his iron gate ajar, and rays of truth you cannot see are flashing through eternity. I do believe that Iblis hath a snare in every human path. Else how, when in the holy grove, I wandered of the idol love, whose daily sense of his snowy wings, with incense of burnt offerings, from the most unpolluted things, whose pleasant bowers are yet so riven, above the trestialed rays from heaven, no mote may shun, no tiniest fly, the lightning of his eagle eye. How was it that ambition crept, unseen amid the revels there, till growing bold he laughed and leapt into the tangles of love's very hair? The end. Okay, so that was Tamerlane by Edgar Allan Poe. Now before I jump straight into the analysis, I'm going to give you a little bit of a summary and just sort of what is actually going on in this poem. So first of all, obviously, there is a main character and he is confessing his sins to a priest, which is why he keeps saying father. Now the narrator, Tamerlane, says that he desires but does not expect forgiveness, and any hope he has must come from a divine rather than a human source. His glory and success seem to have come at the expense of his heart, and he misses his younger days. Once his spirit was very triumphant and born of his early life on a mountain. He rejoiced in battle and victory, and he delighted in the praise of other men. However, in his youth, he also fell in love with a woman who he now can't even remember. The woman was pure and worthy, and Tamerlane loved her deeply as they grew up together in the forests, but he left her in pursuit of his power. Unlike the priest to which he confesses, Tamerlane has known ambition. When he walked through nature with his love, he told her about power and pride, believing that her feelings matched his own, while he dreamed about his future. Nevertheless, he now sees that he sacrificed love for power, and now that he's grown old and he's reached his deathbed, he misses this boyhood and perhaps regrets how his ambition defeated his love. He never explicitly says it, but it's kind of obvious. Now, as for the actual analysis, Tamerlane, if you didn't know, if you've ever been in like a world history class or something, you might know that Tamerlane, or Timur, historically, was a 14th century ruler who founded an empire in Central Asia. But Poe isn't exactly seeking like factual accuracy in his more fanciful retelling of Tamerlane's deathbed confession. Although the real Tamerlane probably would have been Muslim rather than Roman Catholic, Poe takes advantage of this more romantic idea of the famed but flawed conqueror and sets him in a more almost like Western religious setting so that he can confess his youthful sins to a Roman Catholic priest in a lengthy dramatic monologue. The narrative poem then uses an archaic and elevated dictation with a deliberate pace to establish that Tamerlane does not speak as an emotional youth, but rather as a more thoughtful but regretful man in his old age. Poe originally published Tamerlane in his first volume of poetry when he was 18, and then he revised all of them and shortened them for the popular accepted 1829 form of the poem. Now, because of its early placement in Poe's career, the protagonist of Tamerlane can be read in many ways as a prototype for the tormented and sorrowful narrators of his later poems and short stories. You'll notice that there are a lot of similarities with this narrator and other narrators, like the main characters of The Raven and Annabel Lee, which I've actually read on this channel if you guys ever want to go check that out. Now, Tamerlane suffers because the death of his young and beautiful lover, which is literally the exact same thing as The Raven and Annabel Lee. And also, it's kind of similar to the poem I just read by Edgar Allan Poe called Lenore. Now, back to Tamerlane. He differs somewhat from all these other main characters in that whereas they often lost their beloveds for reasons outside of their control, like death, Tamerlane lost his because of his own errors of judgment. In his tragic loss of an early lover, Tamerlane combines the melancholy and nostalgic characteristics of Poe's Gothic characters with the tragic flaw exhibited by the heroes of classic Greek dramas. Like Oedipus in Oedipus Rex, Tamerlane is clever and talented, but he's also very prideful, which leads to, in his case, not necessarily like a downfall, but more of just a lifetime of loneliness. I mean, even as he offers his confession, he shows signs of this egocentricity needed to establish an empire, and he discusses his accomplishments and revels in his might and, like, kingly mind. He continues throughout the poem to justify his behavior, although he recognizes that ambition is a thin excuse for his crime of neglect. And I think that's something that I constantly, recognize in all of his poems, or not all of his poems, sorry, just in Tamerlane, that he, throughout this poem, he was just constantly trying to show that, yes, I did give up love for power, but look what power brought me. However, at the same time, he does understand that he's about to die and there's no one at his bedside. Now, in order to highlight Tamerlane's kind of trade-off of love and power, the poem kind of shows Tamerlane's increasingly successful bids for power with the maiden, who, unlike Tamerlane, comprehends the meaning of love. Sort of like Annabel Lee, another poem, her love and beauty derive from her experiences in the wild forest and her childlike understanding of goodness, while Tamerlane gradually loses his innocence in favor of rule over other men. This contrast reflects the romantic belief that man is at his best during childhood and when in nature. Fittingly, after Tamerlane discovers the wonders of civilization during his travels and his military campaigns, he can't access the intuition embodied by his beloved, and she is irretrievable. Echoes of Poe's later poetic work also appeared in his structuring of Tamerlane. He arranges the poem in stanzas that in turn generally consist of multiple quatrains and couplets with end rhyme, a construction that he uses in the majority of his poetry, and in this case he uses a mostly iambic meter, with approximately 4 feet of alternating, unstressed and stressed syllables. The rhyme and rhythm serve to insert a melodic sound into the poem, which Poe further develops in poems such as The Bells and The Raven. However, the length of Tamerlane is very uncommon and is rare in Poe's mature writings. Now, I could always do a very deep dive and just go stanza by stanza or line by line. However, the issue with that is that this is just such a long poem that I don't believe I would be able to do that without at least taking another 30 minutes of your time. So instead of going into more of an analysis, I'm going to do something that I do occasionally do on this channel, which is instead just kind of connect it to now and how it connects to now, or what connections I see in other pieces of literature. Now, first of all, as soon as I finished this poem, the very first thing I kind of thought of was, I feel like in these days especially, we're seeing a new resurgence of a lot of romance novels. And a trope that you see in a lot of these romance novels is the story about how, there was a girl and a boy and they were very close in childhood, and then he abandoned her because he wanted to become a big, billionaire or whatever. And then he becomes that big billionaire. He achieves all of his goals, and he comes back later and then he realizes, wow, I actually don't have anyone who truly loves me other than maybe my mom, who he maybe also abandoned. And then he goes back and he finds his childhood best friend, and he does whatever he can to basically, get back with her and just maybe not feel so lonely anymore. And normally, they end up becoming a couple, and she's his wife, and he comes home every day to her, cooking a dinner, and it's just the quintessential American love story. I don't know about American love story, but it's the quintessential American love ending. Now, the issue that I have with these tropes more than often is that they're just so unrealistic, and while it's nice sometimes to escape into that unrealistic story or narrative, in this case, it's almost frustrating. And reading this poem, Tamerlane, kind of just shows the more melancholy perspective of it, and how that loneliness is truly just, it can eat you alive. Now, one thing that I really wanted to focus on here is the fact that even though the main character, Tamerlane, is constantly talking about how sad he is and how, lonely he feels, he doesn't necessarily regret his powerful conquest. I mean, the way he talks about it in the poem, he feels very, like, high and mighty of himself. It's very egocentric, and he's talking about how he felt this, like, kingly might, and he just goes on and on about it. And so you can see that, yes, he did lose the love of his life, but it's harder for the reader to feel sorry for him when he's, constantly going on and on about these kingly conquests. And maybe that's just me, but there were certain parts of this poem where I would, like, roll my eyes and be like, come on, man. Like, you're about to die, you're confessing your sins, and all you can think about is this. And then at the same time, there's another part of me that's like, maybe, yes, he is egocentric, but he recognizes that that is what the reality is. The reality is, yes, he lost the true love of his life, but he also understands that he gained so much. Now, maybe not emotionally, and maybe it was material things, but at the end of the day, to him, he did accomplish several goals of his, and he did accomplish goals of his life. Maybe those goals weren't as fulfilling as he expected them to be, but he did do it. And I think that brings up a very important conversation, which is, the goals that we set in life, are they actually fulfilling for us? I mean, I feel like we are always talking about how, even in schools, you'll see people will always tell you, what's your long-time goal? What's your short-time goal? Like, what is a goal that you plan to achieve? And then people will say, I want to work in, let's say, one of the FAANG companies. FAANG companies are companies that are very highly successful tech companies. So it's an acronym. It's FAANG. So Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. And so even though that is an amazing goal to have, and if you achieve it, that is so great for you, we can't help but think, okay, but now is this actually fulfilling me? Is this something that I genuinely wanted to do? Where have I kind of gotten myself? I mean, if I'm just thinking about in the perspective of me, if I was hired by a FAANG company, I would be incredibly grateful, incredibly happy. But I can't help but think, would it genuinely fulfill me? And I feel like that is because when I read this poem, even though I am so frustrated at Tamerlane for acting so strange, I also can't help but, in a way, sort of grieve with him, because he is recognizing that, yes, I have achieved all of these things, but I still don't feel fulfilled. And I think a major reason is because we are constantly told that these goals that we have, they're so important to set, and once we set these successful goals, everything is okay. At least that's what we're told, right? Even in schools, all I've ever been told is set your long-time goal, and your long-time goal needs to be something that's really good and it's going to bring you a lot. And once you achieve that long-time goal, then what, right? We're never told what happens after that. And we can only just help but think that we're going to be happy after that. And I feel like with Tamerlane, he's also been roped into this kind of, I don't want to call it an agenda, but because it's not. But I feel like he's also been roped into this thought that once I achieve all of my goals, I will be happy. However, he has forgotten that goals aren't the only thing that in life. There is a whole another thing. And I feel like one could argue that their goal may be to find true love and have family. But when we're talking about goals, we normally tend to think of more like, I want to be able to retire by the time I'm 40. Or, hey, I want to open my own PR firm, whatever it may be. And I feel like because of that, even now, Tamerlane is just such a beautiful poem. Even now, people still go back and reread it over and over again. Because, yes, the narrator is a bit egocentric, and yes, he lost the love of his life because of actions of his own. It wasn't because because the universe didn't want them together. It's because he genuinely just left her. And now he's regretting it, like almost, 50 years later or something. However, we still are able to connect with him on some way. And maybe it's not because, because me personally, I didn't leave the love of my life that I met in a forest to go off and, go on conquests, obviously, but I can't help but make me wonder about my own life and how in the future, whatever job I do and whatever I do, if it will bring me happiness and if I won't feel lonely like Tamerlane does. Now, that is just my own thought process. That's my own tidbit. If you have anything to add, please comment it down below. I would love to have conversations with you guys over this because I feel like this poem is just so beautiful in itself, and I would love to pick your brains. But that is it for today. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment down below what short story you would like me to read next.